Aloha, everybody. 77 years ago, many of our founding fathers, according to a speech by President Lincoln, we were reminded that people lost their lives fighting for the freedom of this great nation. Well, we have a legislative process that's about to begin, and we want you to plug in. So stay with us today as we chat about that and how you can get involved. Jim, welcome back to the show after a 1-week hiatus.
I'm still sick, too.
Wow, one long sickness, dude. As for our viewers and listeners, you will note that my beautiful co-host today, once again, is Janet Hochberg, who is here in person while her husband is still away getting better. And just so that for the record, we film a couple of these shows back to back. So Jim has not been sick for this many weeks because I don't want him getting all these emails and phone calls thinking that, something horrendous is happening. So welcome back to the show, Jim, and welcome to the show today, Janet.
Oh, thank you. Excited to be here.
Yes. So last week, the legislative session opened, and last week, everybody got to listen to yours and my testimony, Janet, as we walked them through some of the choices we've made in life. So the legislative session technically opened last week, Wednesday. So the legislative session is already going. But Jim, let's start with you, because the reason that I think we need to talk about the legislative process is because of the attack on our freedoms here in the United States. So before I launch it over to Jim, let's watch a quick video put out by Prager University.
President Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is one of the most famous speeches ever given. It is stunning in its brevity, 10 sentences, 272 words, and delivered in just over 2 minutes. Few have said more with less. Lincoln delivered the address on November 19, 1863. He was in Gettysburg to dedicate a national military cemetery to the Union soldiers who fell at the Battle of Gettysburg 4 months earlier. The North's victory here was one of the pivotal battles of the American Civil War. Lincoln begins this way: 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Lincoln goes back in time, not to the signing of the Constitution, but to the Declaration of Independence. The Constitution, in forming our government, was the product of many compromises, most notably slavery. In contrast, the Declaration of Independence declares our enduring national values. In one sentence, Lincoln summarizes the American project: liberty for all and equality of all. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. Lincoln's assertion is twofold. First, the United States is unique. No nation was ever founded on a commitment to liberty and equality. And the Civil War was a trial to see if a nation, based on such lofty ideals, could survive. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania was the site of the bloodiest battle of America's bloodiest war. In 3 days of fighting, 51,000 Americans on both sides, Union and Confederate, were killed, wounded, captured, or missing. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. Lincoln is not in Gettysburg to celebrate the Union victory. Rather, he explains that those who fought were the loyal guardians of the American experiment. With their blood, they watered the tree of liberty. As Lincoln himself knew, how could his words ever compare to that sacrifice? He even speculates that the world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. Ironically, the world remembers what our 16th president said. But do we remember the actions of those who fought at Gettysburg? Lincoln answers that question with a challenge. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. Those who fought and died shouldered our nation's enduring values through the refining fire of Gettysburg and the Civil War. Lincoln points to them and challenges the living. Are we prepared to heed their example? To do what is necessary to advance the founding ideals of the Declaration of Independence? Remember, the Gettysburg Address is a wartime speech. Lincoln is steeling his contemporaries for the many battles, burdens, and responsibilities still ahead. But he's also looking to the future. He is looking to us. Lincoln concludes that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The Union won the Civil War. Slavery ended. And with it, the values of liberty and equality were given a new birth. However, the struggle for liberty and equality continued and persists today. Lincoln foresaw this. To remain a nation dedicated to the proposition that all men, all people, are created equal, and that government of, by, and for the people shall not perish from the earth, these are the unfinished work and the great task remaining of every generation. Ours is no exception. Are we up to President Lincoln's challenge? I'm Professor Doug Dowds of the Army War College for Prager University.
Okay, Jim, I know you've got some thoughts, not only on the video, but I know you've got some thoughts on people getting involved in the legislative process and why they need to plug in. So have at it, my friend.
Well, so this is where I could talk about my neighbor's truck, but I'm not going to. I am not going to.
He's not going to because
You have to-
people, they
have to look at our older shows for that.
Okay.
However, what was very important about that Prager University 5-minute video was what the guy said, the professor said, that in 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, it was written by Thomas Jefferson pretty much, signed in 1776. That is at the very beginning of the fourth quarter of the 18th century. You need to have context together with content to have meaning, as Waxer Tipton always said. So the context is, in the first 3 quarters of the 18th century and backwards from there, Western civilization had monarchies. There were czars or kings or princes who controlled everything. There was no personal liberty. And what the professor said in that very, very, very good video was our entire nation in 1776 was birthed. It was conceived in liberty. It wasn't conceived in monarchy. It wasn't conceived in communism. It wasn't conceived in any other political philosophy, but liberty. And what's interesting about that is, from that conception in liberty for government purposes, if we look from here backwards to there, now there are liberty-based governments all over the world, even in Japan. You get to vote, you pick your political leaders. And the interesting thing is, at the time that the Declaration of Independence was signed, that was so earth-shaking and groundbreaking for government, as if it was in 1980 when the first personal computer was made. That was an earth-shaking change to how we organize this stuff in our life electronically. 1776 Declaration of Independence was that big for how we pick our leaders. So the point is, it needs to remain that big. We can't stop seeing it that way, because if we do, we'll give it away. We'll lose it. As Reagan said, liberty is one generation from being lost, because we have to be vigilant every single generation.
So I when I saw that clip, what kind of jumped at me, and Janet, I'm curious to see how this is going to strike you. But so there was a pastor on YouTube, and I can't remember. I watch a lot of pastors giving a lot of talks on YouTube because I just like to do that. I like to surround myself with talking. But anyway, a pastor asked this question, and it ties into the question about fighting for freedom. It's like, what would you fight and die for today? Viewers and listeners. I know that I hear a lot, families will say, I'd fight and I'd die for my kids, right? But the pastor was asking, if they closed your church and all churches and said that the gospel of Jesus Christ could no longer be preached, would you go down to the catacombs? How would you fight for the loss of that freedom? And the other way that I thought is do I love the United States enough to fight and die for it? And my answer is yes. I served in the United States Air Force in the 1980s. Janet, I know you served in the United States Navy. And if the country then had sent me to war, as much as I'm pro-life, would I fight and die for this country? Yes, I would. Even today, Janet and Jim, even today with the craziness, I love my country so much. I hope I never have to make that choice. And I hope that my brothers and sisters in the armed forces do not have to make that choice. But thinking back to Gettysburg and then fast forwarding it to what's happening today, we still have men and women dying for this country. And I don't want us to be talking about fighting for freedom without letting that slide.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think unequivocally, I believe the exact same way. We both served. We understand the power of our flag. We understand the magnitude of the sacrifice of was it 51,000 on the Confederate and the Union side, equally lost their lives, not in vain. We truly, I've been to Cambodia. I walked on the killing fields. Those weren't lives that were lost in a war, in a battle, for freedoms. Those were lives that a ruthless dictator and leader felt that weren't had any value, kind of like, Planned Parenthood, Margaret, Sanger, that they weren't worthy enough to live. So he systematically genocided them, right? We don't have that in America yet. But I would fight for it because I see the infiltration of those that live here but don't believe in the Constitution, in the values that the lives that were laid down on our behalf for the generations that came after them. But God gave President Lincoln, you got to remember, that's only 161
we're not talking
years ago.
Thousands of years.
This is
within a couple of lifetimes.
Yeah, I mean, I was born, 2 years after,
Not after Lincoln.
No, but not after Lincoln. But I think of, 1863 to, 102 years after. That's not too far gone. And my parents were living through that, and our grandparents. And so the freshness of the Declaration of Independence, and then, establishing the branches of government that were designed, of the people, by the people, for the people, to protect these liberties, and how that is eroding. But I have thoughts on that on a whole.
No, it's so good that you say that, Jim. I know you're going to have some thoughts on this too. It's again remembering that these people, when the United States of America was being built, people willingly gave up their lives and fortunes to fight for this new nation because of the ideals that were being put forth, in these great documents that were happening. Every time I drive to work and my office is there, right over the Pully, I think about the lives lost in the battle, King Kamehameha, in fighting for the unifying of this state that we live in. Because I'm so pro-life, I think about lives lost every time I go anywhere, right? But when I'm driving over the Pully, I think about that those people believed so much in what they were fighting for that they were willing to die for it. Today, do you not hear people in all the media, people saying, I don't want to go to war because I might, they might ask me to kill someone or kill myself. Okay, I understand that. Do people have issues with wanting to shoot someone else? I get that, right? But people that will not fight and die for this country, that I believe we're a great nation.
Well, we're a beacon of hope to the rest of the world.
We should be.
Yeah,
we should be, and we should not be a laughing stock. And right now, I watch Al Jazeera and all these other channels just to hear, and we're mocked.
Yeah.
We are mocked by our own media people sometimes, and on talking heads that are out there. And I think to myself, what are you willing to die for, people?
Right. And, to that point, I think everything in our lives comes from a biblical worldview, right? We know that God is sovereign. He knows the beginning from the end and then from the beginning, right? He holds this. The government is actually, in Isaiah says the government is on his shoulders. Sorry, honey, we'll let you talk in a minute. But that the government is on his shoulders. And I think that, and this is just reality of what you and I, for many years, you more so than myself, but you and Jim have been trying to really convey on the front line of the battlefield, the legislative session being open, is that God has given us such an incredible opportunity and mandate to stand in the gap for these values that went before us stood for, or, fought and died for. And so I believe there is always hope with the Lord, and I believe God's hand is not too short to still save us, because he says that. And I believe that as a body of believers, in our attitude, in our words, the way that we talk, the way that we communicate with our neighbors and friends that are so hostile toward us because they don't know, they don't know, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. I was one of them. And we still have hope to bring restoration to the most beautiful, gracious, powerful land in the world. And my last thought on that is that Jim and I have wonderful neighbors, and the neighbor that lives directly across the street from us, they have the American flag, and they're higher up than we are, so it's elevated on their front porch. And when it's windy out, I can hear that
the flag whipping
in the wind, and oh my gosh, I just get Jesus bumps every time I see that flag out there. It's priceless. It's beautiful. It's our lives.
It is. Jim, I know you've got stuff to say, especially because Janet said the key word, worldview.
Well, what I want to tell us is we're going to be talking about legislation again because it's January. We're going to be asking people to go down to the legislature and testify for or against bills. We don't even know what they are yet. And what I want people to do is rewatch every day that Prager University video and realize when you go down to the legislature and you testify about a bill, and it's pretty obvious that the people in the committee really not only don't agree with you, but they really don't care what you have to say. Conceived in liberty includes not just going to the legislature and giving them your 2 cents on a proposal they have that they want to make into a law. It also includes electing other people that agree with you so that the laws are the way you would like them to be. And in that vein, I would say if you wait until you get your ballot on election time, you're way behind the 8 ball because you only get to pick from who is on the ballot, that were put on the ballot by the people that helped them. What you need to do is be active from the very beginning of the elections season, finding people or running yourself, finding people to run for office or running yourself, helping people's election cycle activities. And then on election day, or if you're voting by mail or whatever it is, then cast your ballot. But at least the names on there you had something to do with. That's what conceived in liberty means.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I will say that I had a very close friend several years ago that asked me to be her maid of honor. And I told her no. And the reason I told her no is because I didn't stand behind the man that she was going to marry. I had my doubts. And let me tell you, saying no to her crushed her. Like, I went through a major crisis with her and our friendship for 2 or 3 weeks because I refused to be her maid of honor. Now, she ultimately did invite me to the wedding, and I did go to the wedding as a guest, but I remember being there thinking, this man is not the right man for you, you know? And I sat with her and I counseled her prior to her getting engaged. I was already concerned at, you know, the way that they were headed. And so I was honest with her that, you know, you are a child of the King, you are precious, and this man does not treat you with the preciousness that you deserve as being a child of the King. And that is a red flag. And, you know, but I think she was getting older. She was in her late 20s. And I think she was starting to feel like, you know, oh my gosh, I'm going to be an old maid or whatever. Anyway, the marriage did not work out. They were married about 3 years, and then they ended, and it was a horrible divorce. She called me in the process of her divorce and in tears. And she was like, you told me this, Eva, you told me this. And I didn't listen. And I wish I had listened. Now, I tie that into what Jim said about the elections, because when you cast your vote for that person, you are basically their maid of honor or their best man. You are saying this person is the best person for this community. I don't care what school they graduated from.
Yeah, great analogy. I love it.
I don't care, you know, where you've sowed seeds and grown plants and all that stuff. It's important. And it is, I am acknowledging that I know that that's contributed to who you are as a person in your community. But unless you can say, I'm standing up for this person and with this person because I believe they're the best person, do not vote for them. Leave it blank if you have the Satan and the Antichrist on your ballot. But we're talking about the legislative process. What the legislative process is, it's the report card that leads up to the election. So when you're watching what's happening at the legislature, you're saying to yourself, I like this, I like this, I like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. You might even have a I like this, but I don't like this scenario. But you have to have that personal relationship with your legislator to know this. And I will go to my grave saying that it serves nothing and no purpose for you to shout at your legislator and tell them they're going to hell and throw scriptures at them and constantly be condemning them. I know for a fact that you are not going to build relationship. And some people may come to a sense of knowledge by that relationship that you've built. So I know there are people that disagree with me. I've had emails from people that go, no, you have to go down there and shout at them and you have to pick it and you have to have signs. There is a time for that. Ecclesiastes tells us there is a time and a season for everything. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen.
And just quickly to Eva's point, Eva, sometimes there's 2,000 bills that are be introduced every legislative session, and our legislature runs from about now January 19th until May 2nd or third week, first week in May.
Yeah.
2,000 bills are being introduced by both sides of the aisle, and Eva reads every single bill, and she forewarns us. She sounds the alarm on what the bills are that we, as a community of conservative, biblical based people, should be, concerned about. So I just wanted to give you a shout out, and you have built those relationships over so many years. I'm just in awe of your just loyalty to the Word of God, to be the watchman so vigilantly and diligently on the wall for the church statewide. It isn't just here on Oahu. It's the entire islands, everyone.
You're so
Can I add to that, Eva?
Yes, you may.
Please do.
So I am retiring, so I won't be working with Eva on analyzing the bills and how it affects things and existing in the statute and all that stuff. If you are a lawyer watching this and you agree with our values and you want to help Eva in my place, please contact her.
Yeah, and I've got to be honest that so this year, 2024, I make 30 years of doing public policy here in the state of Hawaii. And I've had different positions in that time, but 30 years this year. And I have to admit, I'm not quite up on things as I used to be. In my early days, you're right. In fact, Janet, I got to speak at the Red Mass. And so for those of you that might want to have heard my little talk at the Red Mass, it is available. So you can go back and watch it. Maybe I'll put the link. Maybe not.
That's
I
cool.
don't know. I don't know. But so in that 30 years, I was acknowledging how in the early days we actually had to go to the Capitol and pick up boxes of physical bills, thousands of. So every session there's between 1,200 and 1,500 bills that are introduced. And then the next session, even though we have a biannual legislature, there's another 1,500. So within a session, you have 3,000 plus bills. So in the old days, Janet, at my desk, I would be sitting there actually paging through, because you never know if there's that one sentence in there that could attack religious freedom. I mean, Jim is an expert at reading bills because he's an attorney, and Jim needs to be up on the Hawaii revised statutes. And there is a process to how they change law, how they create a new statute, how they maybe repeal. Although in my tenure, I've only seen one repeal, and that I can't remember what it was. So that doesn't happen very often. I wish Hawaii had more of the opportunity to repeal bad laws. And we'll see what happens with the recreational marijuana, because I have my own concerns about that. And I will do a show on that, just so you know about that. That's coming up. But anyway, the point is that we need to be plugged in. So the legislative process is here, and just know that there are new rules now. You have to go through a metal detector. Parking is never fun, but the legislature has made it easy for you to plug in by just doing things online. And you don't have to go down in person. If you're overwhelmed by that, just submit. You can just log on to the website and say, here's the bill number, which you plug in, and say, I oppose and why you oppose it, or I support and here's why I support it. It's that easy. You can make phone calls if that's what you want to do. You plug into hawaiifamilyforum.org and sign up to receive our alerts if you have not done so, because we make it very easy for you to get involved. And we want you to stay plugged in. So we appreciate that you're even plugging in today with us, Jim.
Yes.
Thank you so much for hanging in there. And we wish you Godspeed on getting well, for sure. And then as we move closer to your moving date, maybe what we'll do is have a show with Janet and Jim together in the same room, so that they can kind of tell you where they're going, and
that'd be special.
And maybe give some passing thoughts on what it was like being here in Hawaii. For the rest of you, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification button. So every time we upload a new video, you will be able to watch it. And comment. And we will see you all next week. Mahalo, everybody.